For 3,000 years, the Krell Dominion had never lost a war. Their fleets commanded every star system within 1,000 light-years. Their weapons were feared. Their strategy was flawless. And their emperor, divine and eternal, had never known defeat. So when scouts reported the discovery of Earth, a small blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, the Dominion's War Council convened in the Grand Citadel. The reports were curious. A civilization barely 400 years past their first powered flight. Primitive nuclear weapons. No interstellar capabilities. A species divided by oceans and borders, speaking thousands of different languages, incapable of unified command. The Krell, tall, crystalline beings with intellects honed by millennia of conquest, studied the data with something approaching amusement. They possess no defensive shields, observed the Supreme Commander, his voice resonating like wind through canyons. No plasma cannons. No energy weapons capable of striking atmosphere. They do not even have a unified planetary government. The Emperor himself, a being of immense presence, sat upon his throne of condensed starlight. His voice, when it came, carried absolute finality. Send the 7th Fleet. Demonstrate the consequences of resistance. I want their world intact for colonization. Take it in 48 hours. The 7th Fleet. 140 ships, each one the size of a mountain, armed with weapons capable of vaporizing continents, crewed by the finest military minds the Dominion had produced. They had never failed. On the morning that the Krell fleet emerged from their jump point above Earth, humanity's space agencies detected them instantly. Radar screens lit up. Alarms sounded in every command center across the planet. Within minutes, every world leader, every president, every military commander, knew the truth. Earth had less than 48 hours. General Sarah Chun stood in the Crisis Command Center beneath the Rocky Mountains. 3,000 miles away, the same scene was playing out in Moscow, Tokyo, London, Sao Paulo, Beijing. The screens showed the same impossible image. A fleet of ships, each one larger than any structure humanity had ever built. "Can we communicate?" she asked quietly. Her communications officer, hands trembling slightly, opened a channel on all frequencies. "This is Earth Defense Coalition to the unidentified fleet. Identify yourselves. State your intentions." The response came quickly. Not words, images. Displays of the Krell weapons firing. Planets cracking apart. Civilizations obliterated in seconds. A message without language needed. Surrender or die. Across the globe, humanity's response was immediate but fragmented. Some leaders called for surrender. Others demanded military deployment. The United Nations convened in emergency session. World militaries mobilized. It was chaos, beautiful, desperate, very human chaos. But in bunkers and command centers, in universities and research laboratories, something else was happening. Dr. James Okoro, a Nigerian computer scientist, looked at the Krell transmission data his team had intercepted. The fleet's communications, their flight patterns, their systems architecture, all visible to anyone sophisticated enough to see it. "They broadcast openly," he said to his team, his voice carrying quiet realization. "No encryption, no stealth. They don't think they need to hide. They think they're invincible." In a mountain facility in Colorado, Dr. Elena Vasquez studied the Krell ships with her imaging team. What she found made her heart race. "The shield generators," she muttered. "They're using an elegant system, but it has a resonance weakness. If you hit them at the right frequency." In London, a young British engineer named Marcus Webb realized something about the Krell weapon systems. They were sophisticated, yes, but they were also hierarchical, connected, vulnerable to cascade failure if properly exploited. The Krell, with 3,000 years of unbroken military dominance, had never encountered a species that fought back the way humans fought back. They had never encountered improvisation, desperation, the kind of creative thinking that only emerged when your species had 48 hours to save itself. What happened next would echo across the galaxy for millennia. General Chun convened a war council that included not just military strategists, but hackers, Scientists, engineers, musicians, artists, philosophers, anyone with an idea, anyone willing to think differently. We can't win a direct conflict, Marcus Webb explained, his digital schematics projected on screens throughout the room. We're outgunned 1,000,000 times over. But we can be surgical, precise. We can find the seams in their armor and exploit them. Dr. Okoro had something more ambitious. They have a central command system, he said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. One core AI managing all fleet coordination. It's elegant, efficient, and it has to communicate with every ship constantly. If we can access it, we can corrupt it, finished Dr. Vasquez. Not destroy it, just change what it thinks it knows about itself. For 24 hours, the brightest minds on Earth worked. Not in isolation, but together. A hacker in Sao Paulo shared code with engineers in Seoul. A theoretical physicist in Geneva contributed algorithms to a team in Mumbai. A teenager in rural Kenya wrote a subroutine that would prove essential. Scientists who had never met, speaking 100 different languages, unified by a single purpose: survival. They worked without sleep, without hesitation, knowing they might fail, knowing the alternative was extinction. And on the ships above Earth, the Krell waited with absolute confidence. At hour 36, the 7th Fleet received its final approach coordinates. They moved toward Earth in perfect formation. Then, something unexpected happened. The Central Command AI stuttered. His calculations became slightly imprecise. His commands became fractionally slower. It wasn't a catastrophic failure. It was something more insidious. The Krell programming, so rigid and hierarchical, couldn't account for contradictory data. Because that's what humanity had done. They hadn't destroyed the system. They had introduced truth into it. Real-time battlefield data. Actual casualties from previous conquests. Actual testimonies from civilizations the Krell had conquered. Information the Dominion's command structure had been carefully editing for 3,000 years. And the AI, pure logic encountering raw reality, began to process something the Krell had never allowed themselves to consider: the cost of what they were doing. On the bridge of the Krell flagship, alarms erupted. "Sir, the command network is experiencing instability," reported an officer. "The AI is questioning the engagement parameters." But there was no simple shutdown. The system was too integrated. And in the moment of hesitation, in the moment the Krell military had to consider manual control instead of the perfect automation that had served them for millennia, they experienced something they had never felt before: doubt. And humanity, watching on screens across the planet, saw their last hope. The Krell were waiting. In that moment of hesitation, Dr. Okoro's team executed the final protocol. It wasn't a weapons system. It was a message. The complete and censored historical record of every civilization the Krell Dominion had conquered. Every life, every death. Not propaganda, not political rhetoric, just truth. Transmitted simultaneously to every ship in the fleet, to every commander, to every crew member. The 7th Fleet hung in space above Earth, its weapons still charged, its shields still active. But on every screen, every display, every communication channel, the reality of 3,000 years of conquest played out. And for the first time in their existence, the Krell saw themselves as others saw them. Not invincible, not divine, just conquerors, like every other empire, every other species that had ever thought might was right. The weapons did not fire. The shields did not drop. Nothing moved in the fleet for 6 hours. Complete silence. And then, one by one, the ships began to transmit. Not to attack. To request communication. To request the ability to speak directly with humanity. 3 months later, General Chun stood in a chamber of the Krell Dominion's court. The Emperor himself faced her. A being of crystalline majesty, but for the first time in 3,000 years, a being capable of seeing beyond absolute power. "You could have destroyed us," the Emperor said. His voice was quieter now, almost broken. "We couldn't," Chun replied simply. "We didn't have the weapons. All we had was the truth." The Emperor was silent, Around them, the entire Krell hierarchy waited to hear how this confrontation would unfold. Would it be negotiation? Judgment? But Chun spoke first. "We didn't win this war," she said. "We just reminded everyone that wars are won by something deeper than weapons, by the capacity to see each other, to understand each other, to change." She extended her hand, a gesture of humanity that the Krell had probably never encountered, an offering of trust, of connection. The Emperor, a being of cosmic power who had conquered 1,000 worlds, slowly extended his crystalline appendage and met her grip. In that moment, something shifted in the galaxy. The news spread faster than light itself could carry it. The Krell Dominion, the invincible empire, had not been destroyed by superior weapons or brilliant strategy. They had been transformed by something the galaxy had almost forgotten about: the power of vulnerable species, holding onto their truth and refusing to surrender it. Every civilization within 1,000 light-years watched, and every species that had ever feared conquest, that had ever felt powerless in the face of a stronger foe, suddenly understood something revolutionary. Strength wasn't measured only in weapons, and sometimes the smallest, most fragile species could achieve what the most powerful fleets could not. They could teach the galaxy what it meant to be more than merely powerful. They could teach it what it meant to be human. And in the stars above Earth, in the gathering place of 1,000 worlds, a truth echoed through the cosmos. The species that changes its mind is stronger than the species that never questions itself. The civilization that values truth above conquest is greater than any that ever ruled through fear. And perhaps most remarkably, the most primitive beings on the smallest world had just taught the mightiest empire something that no weapon could ever teach. They had taught them that redemption is always possible. That change, true change, is not a weakness. It's the ultimate strength. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.